Episode 67. WestEnd, or WestMinster, introducing JP Goddard. On the BTS Creative Academy Podcast, UNCUT. With me, your host, Martin Colton. Welcome.
Thank you.
JP.
Yes.
John Paul Goddard. John Paul Goddard, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm scared when people say my full name because I feel like I'm in trouble from my mother.
I say that for people that don't know you more familiarly. I'll get my tongue around that word. You're known as JP.
Yes, everyone knows me as JP.
Everyone knows you as JP.
Yeah, and I was very original. When I chose stage name, I chose JP. So
Yes.
that was lots of intensive thought went into that.
Yes. So it's been a while.
It has
Since we've seen each other last. I knew you a lot when I was younger.
Yes.
We grew up together in the Young People's Theatre.
When I was always cast as your father in whatever role I had, you were always my son, basically.
But we're the same age, aren't we?
Pretty much. I think I'm slightly older than you.
Yes, but we were young at the same time,
Absolutely.
growing up in a Young People's Theatre company.
Yes.
And then we for the last 20 years we've gone off and done obviously our separate things.
We've done a lot of different things.
We have, haven't we? So this is a lovely little catch up.
Yes.
So what I know of JP is that you're a political advisor.
Yeah.
You're a singer, performer,
Well, it's generous of you.
and an aspiring writer as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Lots of it. Yeah. Lots. I guess. I've always tried to think of it as being bored in the same thing. So, like, I feel like I've got lots of strings to my bow, but my mother would say, "Why can't you just choose something?" It's like, you're a politician, then you went to be a barrister, and then you do just do something.
But what? Why? Why do we have to pick one thing?
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of where I got to with it, actually, because I've sort of had quite a few different careers, but that's like teaching or the law or politics or whatever else, and I think it's ingrained in us, isn't it, that we really need to choose one thing and then just pursue that. And I sort of have done that for about 5 years at a time, and then
You rebel against that
and then
philosophy.
move on and try something interesting. I want to try something completely different now.
So what's the main thing going on in your life right now?
Well, the main thing, the thing that I'm taking most seriously at the moment,
Most seriously.
most
So do you
seriously.
sometimes not take things seriously then?
Well, I think there has kind of been elements where that's been true in the past, but I think the thing I'm doing mostly now is I'm writing a musical, and I've been doing it for a couple of years, but not really doing it. So I've been doing it, but I'm trying to be much more intensive about it. And I also wrote a panto last year, which we were hoping to put on for a community thing last year. But in terms of venue and stuff, it didn't quite come off. And it was just useful. It was useful writing to a deadline, really. And actually, I'm quite proud of it. I think it's quite funny. I think there's some good songs and whatever else. So I think we're going to do that next Christmas. So this year, well, it feels weird now we're in 2024. So doing it this Christmas, if we can sort the venue out, because a lot of people that saw it said, no, it would be a really shame not to do this. So, okay, well, maybe let's do it. So I'll try and find the venue and do it this year. So that was helpful in getting me back into kind of the rigor of writing, as it were, and making sure that I try and do it every day. So the musical will happen this year. I mean, it will happen this year in the sense that it will be finished this year. It's sort of already finished, but I hate parts of it.
I think with writing, it's unless, like you say, like you have a deadline, it's very easy for the ideas to just stumble along and come out in spits and spurts. And
I think the other thing I've been trying to get at is going somewhere to write. Because when you're at home, there are lots of distractions, and I'll just go make another cup of coffee, or the doorbell's gone, or this, or that. So
where the phone goes, notification, emails,
exactly that. Or someone's just tagged you in a Facebook post that's hilarious that you must view instantly. And so I've tried to get better at actually going places to write.
Yes, yeah.
And that has been helpful.
Yes, Neil Gaiman. Do you know Neil Gaiman?
I don't know.
No, he's he does fantasy novels and series. He's one of my favourite writers. He goes off to his shed every day with a notepad and pen, no phone, notepad and pen, and that's it. So no electronics at all, and he just writes whatever comes out. He has other things that he does after that to make it better, but he dedicates some time separate away from everyone that is for writing.
Well, that's quite useful. I've done that on occasion, but then I have to say it's productive in one sense, in the sense that I write a lot on a pad and paper, but then I have to then put it on the computer anyway. So I'm not very good at doing that. So yeah, I do take the laptop, I have to say.
Yes,
but I try and switch off the internet and everything.
Turn the notifications off, and get that musical written.
Exactly.
So are you a musical writer? You're writing a musical, but are you writing the music?
Well, I'm adapting the music, as it were. So I'll give you an exclusive. So the musical is called Shine On, and it is based on... There's an Irish country singer called Brendan Shine, hence why it's Shine On. And he was a big part of my my influence growing up as a kid. I come from an Irish family. And so I'm using his music... there are a couple other bits in there as well, but I'm rewriting a lot of the music as well. So, well, not music, rewriting the lyrics to make them scan better for the show, as it were. And it's comedy, so it is meant to be funny as well as the music. So, and actually that's where some of the issue is, because I've rewritten all the songs already. And I'm mostly happy, 80% happy with them. But there's one as well I think really needs a lot of work, and I haven't got that exact X factor on this particular song yet. And when I have that, then the musical will be written, I hope.
Are you sharing this with anyone?
I'm sharing it with some people that I trust and whose advice has been useful, and people that have also written things themselves. And once it was getting to... So it's been a very small circle so far, but now it is more written, as it were. I'll widen that circle out a bit now to yourself and to other people.
Really? Okay. Appreciate that.
To see... Just to get honest feedback. Because I think the other thing is that whenever I send feedback or ask for feedback and I send it out to people, whatever I've done, people are very nice. And so over the years, I've got used to asking, I don't want to hear about what you like, just tell me what you don't like. Or what's the worst bit? Or what's the bit you think doesn't make sense, or whatever else.
So I was going to ask you, what does that trust look like when you choose a small circle? What does that how do you judge that who you're sharing with?
I think it's useful in life. So the friend that will always be honest with you, even if it's not what you want to hear. And I'm very lucky. I've got quite a few people in my life that are quite happy to tell me you're an absolute idiot. So yeah, those people that are so people like Andrew Johnson, who obviously
mutual friend, great
friends with, and you know as well, and from days politically with him, and now in friendship, and then people like Ange Blackwell, who is just the nicest person in the world, and also in herself really literary advanced, and when we go and watch this together, we sort of dissect it in the interval and afterwards, and so her opinion carries an awful lot of weight. But people that just aren't afraid to say to me, I don't think this works. And actually there was a particular part when I shared this with Ange that she'd said to me, I see where you're going with this particular relationship, but it's a bit caricature, it's a bit cartoony, she's not very nice to him. And I was like, yeah, I see what you're saying. And actually, I took that advice and I've rewritten that section. And it's better, so I think she's right. So ultimately, it is about whether it's fruitful. Now, there are sometimes you get advice and so I'm not sure about this song, but if you really believe in it, you've got to back yourself. So it is quite... but for me, I think also it's one of those things, it's about trying to do things first, and you know yourself, when you put something in front of an audience, something that you love, and it just dies a death, or something you think, oh, I'm not sure if I should take that gag out, or I'm not sure I should take this passage out, and then they love it. So a lot of the time it's driven by the audience, I guess, as well.
Yeah. So how do you weigh up what is the good advice and the bad advice?
Trial and error. I think you've just got to, if you, like I said, if you think you're right about something, you need to back yourself, and try it, and you'll be proved right, or you'll be proved wrong. And quite often, from the page to the stage, it's quite different as well. What you give to actors, and the way they interpret what you've written. Sometimes it's the complete opposite of what you're going for, and that can, in itself, be liberating and brilliant and so much better, or it can be, no, that's really not where I wanted to do. So what I also try to do now is not be too much part of the rehearsal process, sort of give the baby and let them look after it, and then see what they come up with. Because I think, particularly if you're writing and you're directing as well, you're in a situation where you're like, well, no, I want it done like this, and actually you take away. And of course, you need that vision, and you need that sequential sequencing of events, if you like, but to get from A to B. But I don't think you want to stifle the creativity of actors. Give them an opportunity. Well, how do you see it? What do you want to do?
Yeah, within whether it's TV, film, theatre, whatever it is you're creating, there are different clogs to the machine.
Absolutely.
And if you was to try and be all of those clogs, the writer, the director, the composer, it kind of doesn't. I've never really seen that work without bits of it starting to fall apart. I think you do need to bring in that collaboration, don't you?
And I think that was the toughest thing, because as you know, I'm a complete control freak. So it's like so when you're doing stuff, and it's fun if you're doing something quite last minute. I've put on shows quite last minute, and if you're really tight for time, and it's like, no, we've got to do this, and this, right? Because we've got to get a show out. But ultimately, when you have got more time, it's more useful in that sense. And actually, it's the first time I've tackled a proper musical. I've written a couple of musicals over the year, but they're not really proper musicals, but I've done some stuff over the years. But there is a play that I've wanted to write for 20 years, and I think doing the musical this time around was, in a way, was stopping me doing that. Because I feel like I'm almost ready to write it, but not yet. But that will be my absolute baby.
Right, okay. And there is something to be said. Like, I say that it doesn't always work, you trying to be all parts, but there is something about doing a production for yourself, for you. You have an idea for something creative that you want to put on as a performer. Yeah. No one else is there behind you to do all the other steps. So go out there and do it yourself. Yeah. So with this musical, are you going to be in the musical? Would that be a dream?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to lie and say that I haven't specifically written the main part for myself. But actually, as the time's gone on, there's another part in it that would be quite comical if I did it. And I am sort of starting to think I might do that.
Because it's hard for as a performer. We sit around and, I don't want to say we sit around and wait, but we are seeking permission to be part of someone else's thing. And that doesn't always happen for us, does it?
No, I mean, you talk about me and the Playhouse pantomime specifically.
I'm talking about all of us as performers. As me as an actor, my last 20 years, I went out there asking to be part of other people's projects.
It's been difficult for me in the sense that I hated the big casting calls. I hated the go and line up for auditions, go in, do 10 seconds when you spent 4 hours in the cold outside waiting. And actually, there's some new performers that I'm collaborating with on a kind of WestEnd brunch type thing. Last week, one of those girls spent 3 days out at open auditions, and I kind of hated that. But then I think I did get a bit lazy about it, but what I did do is that when you do get cast in something, luckily people quite liked working with me. So I did tend to, when you see my performing CV, it is sort of over and over the same companies, because once you get your name out there and people enjoyed working with you, then you'll do a good job. So I think my last audition was probably about 20 years ago because, open audition. But because then you go in and well, I mean, sometimes, quite often, people just are thinking, well, they'll cast you if they're going to take something on. I know JP will do that part or whatever. And because I was never a lead, I was always a character actor. So, you know, I was like the funny and the fluff normally for about 25 minutes of stage time, which was fantastic. I mean, I particularly liked anything that I was killed off by in the interval, which was quite good. I didn't like them.
You can have your moment to shine. You can have your time, and then sit up in the dressing room drinking and having fun. And
I mean, Martin, having seen the dressing room before, you know I never drink in the dressing room. And there's definitely no lie in that whatsoever. We've never done that.
No, well, it was a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. That was when we were young.
I have to say, I think around that time, my parties were quite legendary.
They were. Are we ready for a reminiscing? Are we going back? We've done with the now. Oh, no. Are we going to reminisce, JP?
We can do.
We're going to.
If you'd like to.
Yeah, it would be. That's what I was actually looking forward to with seeing you today. Was going back to those beginning days of theatre.
Before I had grey hair.
So we met in a show called The Mysteries.
We did,
which was in 2000.
Was that when it was?
It was in 2000. Yeah.
Nearly a quarter of a century. Doesn't that?
That is very strange.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. And I was 16. How old were you at that time? 2000.
2000. I would have been 18, 19.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
18,
was that for you the beginning of your performing life?
Well, no, because I'd done choir stuff for Joseph. So it's part of the choir, the kids of the choir.
Mm-hmm.
And
when you say Joseph in the Technicolor
Dreamcoat, yeah,
was in a amateur production of that?
No, at the Palladium.
At the Palladium.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're at the Palladium in London.
Obviously not. There wasn't any acting role based. I mean, you're just the kids, right?
Yes, yeah.
That's it. And the whole,
so you got thrown into that at quite a young age, did you?
Yeah.
Your parents saw that was you were a performer.
No, they were dead against it. Yeah, absolutely dead against it. Hated it. Hated having to get me there. Hated. Thought it wasn't a proper career. I fought quite tooth and nail because I really wanted.
So you were the one that wanted this.
Yeah, I remember there was. So when I was at primary school, I had a teacher called Mrs. Owers, she was the class 1 teacher, Joyce Owers. This is at Holy Cross School, and she was also she was my first ever teacher. She was my class 1 teacher, but she was also the sort of music teacher. In them days, there was always one teacher who played the piano at assembly or whatever else. And I had, and in them days, I had a lovely voice. And so she really sort of nurtured that and sort of would give me really good parts in different things. That there weren't an awful lot of shows at our school. And I remember she saying at some point to my parents, I think he'd really enjoy theatre school. And I would have really, and I plagued them. And they were like, no, you're not going away to school, whatever else. And then I sort of did do some other bits. So I'd sort of done that and blagged that. And then from that, there were Oliver was going on at the time. I think it was at Theatre Royal Drury Lane. And then I did quite a lot of open auditions and for Dodger. And I got quite far into it every time I did it, but never quite cast as Dodger. Although I'd done some little bits and pieces around it. And then that was kind of it. Well, then my voice broke, or didn't break, because you were supposed to stop singing for a year, and I didn't, but I didn't know that. Which is why I'm still quite high up the register now, just speaking. So I did that, and then a play came up with John Harris at the Playhouse with Animal Farm, which was...
So then you started finding the local community theatre, right? Yeah,
because it wasn't something that I really knew sort of existed, if you see what I mean. I mean, I'd been to the West End, so I knew that was there.
Yes.
I used to go to the Playhouse Panto or kids shows that would be on TV that would then transfer to the Playhouse, whatever else. But it never really occurred to me that there was a way into stuff like that. And then I heard about this audition. I went for this open audition, and I was cast as Boxer in Animal Farm, which was quite a big part. And also it was quite a tear-jerking part. And so it was kind of, I think I was always a bit of a performer, and you can read into that gobby show-off. And so even really quite young, I was used to getting laughs, sort of at 12, 13. I was the kind of clown, if you like. But not really having emotion in any other sense from an audience. And so obviously Boxer dies and whatever, and it was quite, I was like, oh, that's different. And then I really looked more into theatre, if you see what I mean, as opposed to just musicals and singing, which is what I loved. Yeah. And then I think it was the next show or a couple of shows later, then we met
on the main stage at the Playhouse.
Yeah. And was it the Mysteries that we started with?
It was the Mysteries where it started for me, that's for sure.
And I was cast as your father.
He was,
Who
yes.
had to kill you.
It's funny because I don't have any memories of like the rehearsal period. I remember the show.
Yeah.
I remember me and you would walk around it. We had this. It was a collection of short stories from the Bible, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
None of us were particularly like it was. We were doing it because we were religious, were we? Or it wasn't being put on for a religious event, was it?
No.
No.
I don't even think it was. It Easter or was it summer? I can't remember.
No, I don't think it had any particular time. I just think the director and the person that was putting this together, Lawrence,
Yeah.
who was a great mentor to all of us, wasn't he,
yeah.
Lawrence? And yeah, he had this play where he could get a large collection of the youth from the town together,
Yeah.
and give them something to do,
Yeah.
and give everyone their opportunity to shine and have their moment.
Yeah,
didn't he?
And who wanted to be in the studio squirting each other at Bugsy Me Lane? We'd much rather be doing religious epics at 12, 13, 14.
But I think
it was.
I think it was that moment to shine for all of us in that production.
Yeah.
There was, I think there was like 30 to 40 young people in it. It was big, wasn't it?
It was, and I think,
and we all had a scene, a small story, didn't we?
And I think that's true in the sense that we were sort of all lead roles, weren't we? So just to dive straight 9 into minutes.
To dive straight in and have a lead role. That was quite a clever thing to do, actually, wasn't it?
It was, and actually it was really interesting. One of the things that I regret about that show is I never really saw. I think it must be quite interesting from an audience point of view, because also we were never out the front watching it. So, and you're sort of in the dressing room listening for your cues for where we are. And
God, I remember this guy saying that. It is really taking me back now. There was this guy that didn't come on, did it? Do you remember? Do you remember there was like this table scene? And we're all, one at a time, we've all got like a little thing to say. Yeah. And the guy on the end of the table's not there. Yeah. So we're watching it, each person say their line. And it gets to my line, I say my line, and the next person, and I'm thinking, how's this going to end if he's not there? And he walks on for his line and sits down.
The one I remember about that play with you was I'm about to kill you or sacrifice you to show to God that I'm willing to do anything that God says. And so I sort of put this sword above my head and I need to bring it down. And as I bring it down, an angel of mercy is meant to appear and stop me. And I remember one night I had the sword up there above my head and I'm about to bring it down. And I look to look up to the gods to where the angel's supposed to appear. And I just see she's not there. And,
so am I going to cut his head off?
And I'm like, if I swing this now, there's literally no one to shout stop.
Yeah.
So I think I started making up work. I think I started making up, and I'm walking around and sort of doing this angst in my head about
can I kill him? Shall I kill him? And I'm just there waiting.
You look at me going, what the bloody hell are you doing? Like this, I appreciate you're an actor, but this is no time to improvise. And then I'm thinking about a minute into it, you'd looked up to where and you were like, oh yeah, she isn't there. Right? So, and I think it was Emma, her name, wasn't it?
Yes,
I can't remember.
Yeah, Emma.
So she wasn't there, and so I think I had lived for about 3 minutes. just on this internal angst, only to then see this like white sheet come through the curtain and go, oh, Christ for that. So then did it, and then I was about to bring it down. But and actually that in itself as well is really telling, because what do you do in that situation?
You're learning. We were in a position where we were learning so much that we didn't realise it at the time. It was all fun and games. But we came away with these massive life skills. One, in confidence, because prior to that, my confidence was, you know, I wouldn't say boo to a goose. Like I was really quiet. And then having this sense of that the powerfulness almost that I can do something. Yeah. And I just wanted to drive that forward with the rest of my life.
And I also remember in that show, I remember Lawrence, there being a massive intake of breath from those assembled when he said there wasn't going to be a prompt.
Yes, yeah.
And there wasn't any prompts in his shows.
Yeah, so it was us on the stage with the spotlight on us, doing the thing that we practice and rehearse. Yeah. And we had to pull it off, didn't we?
And actually, as a consequence, anything I've ever directed, I've never had a prompt.
No, I would never.
Because actually, the thing is, there are enough people on stage to help you out if you need to. If you really, and we all dry occasionally, don't we?
Yeah. Or have them moments where someone doesn't come on where they're meant to come on.
Or have them moments where halfway through a play, I did about a page and a half dialogue from a different play. Wow, that was, and actually it is really weird the way that even speeches or pieces of text, I find this particularly with Shakespeare, that I can't remember, I don't know my phone number, right?
But you remember the Shakespeare.
Occasionally.
Yes, like literally, this is weird, right? I can just do it now, but soft. Yeah. What light through yonder window breaks. From Romeo and Juliet in 2000. That was the next show that we did together, where you was the Friar Lawrence and I was Romeo. Yeah. And I can't remember the entirety, but I can remember. I think we should we should see what you remember now. Shall I do my one first? Go on. You go first.
Cheer and night's dank dew to dry. I must upfill this osier cage of ours with baleful weeds and precious juiced flowers. I can't remember anymore. But how many years ago was that? Yeah. Must be.
Can I have a go? Because I want to see if I can do this. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and watch the silver moon, who is sick and envious with grief that thou her maid art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vessel livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. It is my angel. Oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? How was that stored in there? No. I know that was wrong. I know that was wrong. That was wrong in the performance and the delivery, but it was stored away somewhere up here for 22 years. I know. And I haven't had a need to. I think I used it in a few auditions afterwards, but I really haven't had a need in 20 years to pull that out. No, and it just came. So I know. Why?
I know, absolutely crazy. And if someone introduced me, someone in a pub last night and said, this is my girlfriend Emma or Hannah or Patrice or whatever, the next time I meet her, I go, what's her name? Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't remember someone's name in their face, but I know, it's crazy. Yeah, absolutely crazy.
I think when we have a period of time when we focus so much on something, I think we can almost like file that away for storage, and like maybe our brain goes, right, this is important. We need to keep this.
Yeah. Although my brain tends to keep what's not important. I think it's like, you've got a doctor's appointment on Thursday. I'll forget that one. But I will remember Friar Lawrence's speech, his little death speech from 22 years
and
ago.
Again, that was another moment where it's Lawrence, who led that young people's theatre, he really knew what he was doing with us, didn't he? He really pulled together a family of young people who became really close friends, who all supported each other. Yeah, he had this way to create a team, didn't he?
Yeah, and you'll remember as well, I famously didn't want to do it. I mean, I'd really enjoyed the Passion Plays, or the Mysteries, whatever we call it, the Mysteries, but they are effectively the Passion Plays. But I really didn't want to do Shakespeare. I really didn't want to do it. And
and I hated Shakespeare. Do you know what? I hated Shakespeare at school.
Yeah.
It was torture sitting me in that room where you sat down at a desk and the English teacher made you read some Shakespeare.
Yeah. I actually told Lawrence I wasn't doing it. Twice, I think I said to him I wasn't doing this. No, you'll be really, and you and Martin are great together, and you'll be fine with this, and it's basically this and whatever. And I remember Michael Bramwell, who used to be at Harlow Ballet Association, saying to me at some point, I've always sort of seen Friar Lawrence as with a kind of West country accent. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. I'm going to do that. I remember going into one of the first rehearsals and just speaking my lines with this kind of West country farmer's accent, and Lawrence going, what the bloody hell are you doing? And I was like, well, I spoke to Michael Brown. He said, listen, that's not how you come to a part. You need to find the part yourself and whatever else. And through exploration of the text as we go on, and what Lawrence was also very good at was, there's a line written down, baleful weeds and precious juiced flowers, doesn't mean a lot to us, but when he would say, well, but this is what it means. And then actually there was this kind of botanical bent, which then could lead into Friar Lawrence being a bit of a gardener, could be a bit of a farmer, could be a bit West Country. And I think I tried to do...
You do know this is all online, don't you?
Yeah.
Do you know this? That this is on YouTube.
What?
Romeo and Juliet and the Mysteries is on YouTube.
Are they?
Yeah. I put them on YouTube about 15 years ago.
I think I did remember Romeo and Juliet, but I didn't remember.
I'll send you links.
Oh, that's hilarious. But I remember there was somebody who was my mate at the time saying to me that every scene was about what accent was JP going to do this scene, because it had gone from West Country to farmer to Irish to Northern to Welsh.
Yeah.
I discovered quite early then that accents were more difficult than I thought they were going to be. But actually it was quite useful, because then I think I was a bit horrified by him watching it back at the time. That it then did kind of make me really... And now I'm quite good at accents, but I clearly wasn't then.
And then I'm having so many flashbacks now. I'm remembering that was my first brushes with some celebrities as well at that time, because it was
That's very kind of you to say.
Well, you know,
Thank you.
that's at the top of my CV. Worked with JP.
Well, that's absolutely true.
But yeah, Paul Daniels. Do you remember the Paul Daniels moment?
I do remember the Paul Daniels moment.
Where we came off from our scene and Paul Daniels was just standing next to the dressing room. It was like very surreal that we walked out and next to our dressing room, Paul Daniels had just leant up against the wall, and I had a quick change. And I'm trying to get dressed, and I think you said to him, "Oh, he's got like 10 seconds before he's got to get." And all of a sudden, Paul Daniels is there with my trousers. helping me get into my trousers.
That was actually
and
true.
I was like, this is weird. This
but do you remember my gag?
Surreal. Go on.
Do you remember my gag with Paul Daniels? Because I have to say it's not as organic as I may have led people to believe. Because I actually said to someone, because he was stood in the wings watching what we were doing, and as we come off, he was actually really nice.
He was.
Like, oh, very good, whatever. And I got one of the girls and I said, ask him, did he like it? And so she said, did you like it? And I went, he did, but not a lot. Because like Paul Daniels' catchphrase used to be, you'll like this, not a lot. Right?
Yes, yeah.
And everyone, God, that's a really dated joke now, isn't it? But I remember that it actually brought the house down, and he gave me a wink. And it was like a wink that it was just like, you'll go far, my son. And actually, it's so crazy. I remember it. Yeah,
it's funny. In that same evening, I had two very polar opposite moments. I had someone like Paul Daniels. He came and gave me like a pat on the shoulder, and you'll go far. Stick at this. Like for you to be doing Romeo and Juliet at 16, you know, from here it can only get better. Keep going. And I remember that. But on the same evening, I also bumped into Louis Theroux.
Yeah. Because do you remember it was because it was Debbie's new ballet called Ballet Imaginaire.
Yes.
That's what she'd always wanted
That's
to do.
what they were doing on the main. So they were on the main stage on
That's
the big.
right, yeah.
You know, like, how many seats are in there? 400, 500.
Yeah, 450, something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that. They're busy doing that on the main stage and doing a documentary about it with Louis Theroux.
Yeah.
Whilst we're upstairs in the studio space, which has about 50 seats.
Yeah.
But then we all came into the bar together to have like this. We were having our after show and they're having their after show.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you could have these moments with. Yeah,
and it was crazy. And I remember talking to Louis Theroux quite a lot, actually. Who was actually very loving and very generous.
Oh, see, this is what I was going to say about, for me, polar opposite moments.
Oh, right.
I had a kind of, so I had that nice moment with Paul Daniels where he gave me a bit of encouragement. And then I went over to Louis Theroux and I was quite nervous. I was like, oh, this is that guy off TV that just did the Jimmy Savile documentary.
Yeah.
Because that had only been on recently.
God,
It was massive documentary. Like the whole country watched it, didn't they?
And he was with Neil and Christine Hamilton when they got arrested.
That's right. Yeah, so he was huge at that time, and he's made a bit of a he's kind of come back now.
Yeah?
He's very popular now, and he's a great interviewer, and I do admire his style. But at the time, I knew I just wanted to speak to him, but I didn't know what I wanted to say, and I just said something like, "Oh, was Jimmy Savile really like that?" And he just looked at me and he went, "What kind of a question is that?"
So wait, did he say that to you?
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know. I just wanted to say hello.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But I was really kind of like on a downer from that. I
Yeah.
was like, just been like booted away. He actually told me to go. He actually said, go away and rethink the question like that. And I was a bit like,
Wow.
oh, okay. And do you know what? I think somewhere in my mind, I've been rethinking the questions ever since, which has led me to this.
Maybe.
Yeah, so my brain has been working on that slowly to rethink the questions.
And I think potentially what may have happened, it may have depended how, what kid number you were that went up to him.
Yes, exactly.
Because I went up to him quite early on, so I was probably one of the first people to speak to
and
him.
he'd probably spent 15 minutes with you.
And he was
Somebody's like, oh, bloody
and then
hell,
he was
another
like,
one.
oh, God, I've got to do them all now. So
Yes,
he was probably quite dismissive. Because he was also trying to make a documentary.
Yeah, of course. No, the crew were all around at the time,
they
and
were
we're all
filming, weren't they?
we're all like Mr. Louis Theroux tapping him on the shoulder. Yeah, so no, I don't take it in like a personal way that I'm putting him down and saying he's not a nice person. Like he clearly is a genuine person, and he's a great interviewer. But as a 16-year-old, that put me on the back foot. And but however, in some strange way, made me think and pushed me forward.
And so I guess the thing is when you had a warm experience with Paul Daniels and a less warm one with Louis Theroux, but I guess the point is, from which conversation did you take more out of? Because you were saying in lots of ways, I'm still asking the questions now or thinking about, and what a great lesson to learn so early on to actually ask. I remember when I was in politics in Harlow, first of all, and
so how did you jump from being this theatrical person to going, right now I'm going to do politics? How did that happen?
By complete accident. And then I got annoyed, and then I got really bloody annoyed. And
with the political landscape?
Yeah. And so I was working as a youth worker for the council at the time. So I was a council employee. And there was some funding that was kind of pulled that was meant to be there that was going to affect young people. And it was about going on a trip to an orphanage in Romania that was going to be match funded. And it was match funded by Essex money and some other money, and then some Harlow Council money. And they decided that something, I can't remember the exact details, but basically the budgets had been overspent elsewhere, so they were clawing back additional spend. And I was sort of really involved in this, and I was really furious about it. And I went to the then chair of the council to ask what could we do, whatever else. And I went to the leader of the council, both of whom were quite dismissive. And I was really pissed off. So the next thing I did, I didn't even know, like, because I was a very lowly youth worker. I was like probably the bottom rung of the council. And I demanded a meeting with the chief executive, who quite rightly said no. And then one day I walked from my office, which was just underneath the Acacia House, to to the new town hall, and I just went into the chief executive's office and told him I was resigning and that he was useless and that politics was useless. And I went from there to the elections office and picked up an election pack. And I'd intended to stand as an independent. And the chair of the council, who'd really annoyed me because he was quite dismissive of me, that was the seat I chose. And so I went on this, and then I was adopted by a political party, which I wasn't expecting. I gave it a massive campaign and lost, but he lost as well. And so someone else had come through the middle because I'd taken so many votes off him, I think. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of my point. That was kind of it. I was done. I stood up, I'd made a point, and that's what I was going to do. And then after that, people have said, you know, you've brought a lot of young people in, and there seems to be something there. You're probably too good to walk away from this. Why don't you try and apply and get what's known as a safer seat, or a safe seat, or a slightly more winnable seat, because we're never going to win from the seat that I'd chosen, particularly if you do it from a political party standpoint. Mm. And so I was convinced I'd do one more year. I'd try one more year. So I did, and won. And that's when a nightmare for a lot of Harlow Council councillors and officers particularly began. They had then had 4 years of absolute hell.
Right. And what gave you the confidence to be so decisive with this?
I blagging probably. Mm-hmm. Is the truth of it. I think I also...
But that blagging requires confidence. So where do you think that was established within you?
I think the truth...
Is it the link of the theatre?
Well, I mean, I certainly... It's just a lot of the same role, isn't it, really? Because quite a lot of the time you're standing up saying a script that you might not always 100% believe in, but that is the line, therefore that is the script. Mm. But I was one of those ones that I definitely had my arguments privately. As if you ever interview Andrew Johnston again, you can ask, because obviously he was leader and I was deputy leader then, because I became deputy leader quite quickly, it was all very strange. It was all a bizarre thing. But I think the truth of it was, having gone to a lot of the meetings, gone to a lot of committees, and I did do that for over a year, because if I was going to get elected, I wanted to I wanted to do things. I didn't want to then spend the next 18 months, 2 years learning about I wanted to know where everything was and where policy situations were, so that I could think about how you make stuff better. And I think the truth of it is, and this is no slight, well, I guess it is kind of a slight, but the talent that was on Harlow Council at that particular time, and I don't think Harlow's unique in this aspect. Mm-hmm. I think if there's ever a point, if you're sat across from 12 people debating a subject and thinking, is there anything you've got to say that's valuable or more valuable than what they're saying, or if you've got a different idea? And actually the truth was, the skills base on local council was very, very low. I mean, they were very well-meaning, in most instances, pensioners, mm-hmm. That had time to give up, but they weren't really that bothered. And I'm sure they were in lots of ways, but I guess what was really important to me, everyone loves Pets Corner, everyone loves the Playhouse, whatever else. And I remember, but actually there was a big fight to keep them open, mm-hmm. like a massive fight. And actually it looked at one point like first of all, the Playhouse did close before my time on the council. Mm-hmm. And then was reopened. And then there was another time when I think £100,000 was taken from the budget, and speaking to people that I trusted was effectively going to lead to the Playhouse closing. And it was almost like no one had seen this coming. And so there was like a scrutiny meeting, and it's the longest ever meeting of a Harlow council. It went 14 hours. Wow. Chaired by absolutely the incomparable and fantastic Nick Churchill, who chaired that meeting, and reversed a result that effectively was part of his own party. Because the chair of environment is the committee it went through. That was a Conservative, and these were the days when the Conservative and Liberal Democrats were in coalition with each other. So effectively, it was reversing their own policy, as it were, and it caused a lot of consternation. But it's no exaggeration to say, without Nick Churchill, probably the Playhouse and definitely Pet's Corner would be closed.
Why do you think that there's so much, the community have so much love for these local things like the theatres and the local farms and the local community spaces? There's a lot of love from the community for that.
Yeah.
But then there doesn't seem to be always quite so much love from the people that are holding the purse strings. Because
they're holding the purse strings. And so what was interesting, I mean, what was remarkable about my time arriving at the council was I was declared the winner at about 1:20 in the morning at the Latin Bush Centre on an election night. That's when my count came through. And then we went back and had some drinks, and I felt a bit worse for wear. And at 8:00 in the morning, there was a knock on the door, in which this person sitting in front of me gave me a brown envelope, and I opened it, and it was to tell me that Harlow Council had been inspected previously, and it hadn't been made public yet, but it had failed the inspection. It was poor. It was in the bottom 10% of local authorities in the country, and potentially was going to go into special measures, which effectively meant I was a councillor, I'd just been elected for 4 years, but effectively I may be thrown off the council and a government inspector come in and run Harlow Council. Now, the council had been mismanaged for many, many years, and the council finances were in real problems, and there was about a £2 million black hole. And so I'd said to you, I spent 18 months sitting about what I want to do when I get on the council, whatever else. And the truth is, nearly everything I wanted to do cost money. So I was looking for budget increases where there was a £2 million black hole. And so before we did anything, we had to try and find that money. And we were in opposition at the time. It was then a Liberal Labour coalition. So I was in the opposition, and the opposition get 2 chairmanships of committees. Called scrutiny committees, and I was made the chairman of one, and Nick Church was made the chairman of the other. But Nick's one was calling, so it's only if an issue arises that, if there's no issue arise, then there's no meeting that year for that committee, unless something is called in. Whereas I was a preview and best value scrutiny committee, so it was about we had our own workload, but it was chaired by the opposition. So I was the only permanent opposition chairman, and I'd just been elected. So it was kind of, it was quite a crazy time. But I made the most out of the opportunity. And I don't know if you remember, there was this, what was called this Semalto exercise. It was about 500 people that were surveyed about what they wanted, and that helped form what closed and what stayed open and whatever else. And people were quite upset at the time because they might have had different answers. But I think what's difficult about it was you can love the Playhouse, you can love Pet's Corner, you can love these kind of things. And actually, as a member of the council, because it's difficult when I say, oh, yeah, but I would say that, wouldn't I? But I didn't love the Playhouse any less. I didn't love Pet's Corner any less than anyone else. But you are responsible for putting a budget together. And if you keep those things, which are expensive, what do you then do? There's only so much you can raise council tax. And I think in those days, putting 1% on council tax would bring in £60,000. And I think you were capped at 3%. So the most you could bring in is £180,000 a year just from a tax increase. So what else do you cut if you've got a £2 million budget? And I think what the other thing that it needed to do, and again, this is where Nick Churchill was brilliant. If you look at Pet's Corner now, there's now a classroom there, which Nick was really behind. There's now a shop there, which Nick was really behind, and also he still works in that shop, as a volunteer, despite being a member of the council. But his job was to go into Pets Corner and actually we used to call him the councillor for Pets Corner. You know, that was his constituency. Although he was the same ward as me in Sumners and Kingsmore. But you know, it's really true that he is someone that was so influential at that time in very small ways. Because if you're not involved with Pets Corner, you probably wouldn't know who Nick was unless you were in his ward, because he was very active in the ward, and he still is very active in the ward. And so I guess from that point of view, it's really tough, and it's really easy to criticise when people say to me, "Oh, we got rid of Sam Place, or we got rid of community buildings, we did this, we did that, and whatever else," because we didn't have any money. And the thing I would always say to them was, "All right, well, fine, we won't make cuts there. You tell me what else we should cut." Like, because everyone wants to fight for their own thing. Now, there's a lot that Harlow has in terms of things like the theatre, which is Harlow Council funded primarily, Pets Corner, things like the paddling pools around the town park. Those are very expensive things, and lots of other towns don't have them, and they are the sort of jewels in the crown of Harlow, I think. But other, I mean, it's a great example, like Victoria Hall, right? I mean, you'd love another 150 grand a year from the council.
Well, we don't get any money from the
exactly,
council.
Right? But you've had to find your way. And so one of the things that Nick and I were very, and also Chris Fordinandos were very keen on, was saying, yeah, Pets Corner, but let's get a shop in Pets Corner, because
let's find other channels for the funding to come through rather than just... Yeah,
exactly that. And the Playhouse needed to do more commercially. And I think it did happen over time, but it was quite precarious. And then, you know, you're basically... So I think the first headline I was ever included was when the thing became public, was when the inspector... The report was made public, was Ship of Fools, or Harlow Council was a ship of fools. And I was like, but I wasn't even here when this inspection was done, right? So in lots of ways, it did sort of make me quite a good person to help lead the recovery programme, on the basis that, I mean, trust between councillors and officers was at an all-time low. I mean, it's not exaggerating to say there was hatred for each other on both sides in lots of cases. Whereas I did think there was an element of, not because I was any better, but I was perhaps better placed to say, well, look, I wasn't here. I'm the one. Well, yeah, but but I wasn't here then, right? So let's go from now, right? This is the change, because if not, there would have been someone who's been on the council for 20 years in my position.
So how did you move on from, you were part of the local government? How did you move from going local to then being a political advisor higher up? How did that transform? Well,
I really liked David Cameron, and quite early on, I thought he was going to be an eventual leader down the line, and so I sort of made contact with him, and it happened a lot more quickly than I thought it was going to, because I think everyone assumed that David Davis would be the next leader. And I certainly wouldn't have been unhappy with David Davis as a leader, but I'd sort of made it known to the people around David Cameron, and I'd known Sam a bit as well. In fact, I probably knew Sam Cameron better than I knew David in lots of ways, and George Osborne, because they were still very close then. And I had a lot of time for David. I had no time for George. I mean, I had a lot of time for him personally, but I had no time for him politically. I thought he was a bit Severus Snape, you know, the kind of snarly thing.
Yes.
And I've told him this recently. So I'm not, and I still class him as, you know, someone that I do like and respect. But when DC said that he was gonna go for it, I was really surprised, because and he said, would I join the campaign? I said I would, and he said, what do you think? And I said, I think you'll give a good showing, but you're gonna lose. Starting my completely unbroken chain of calling so many political results wrong. Because I was never going to win myself, and I told everyone I wasn't going to win the seat, and I won it. And then I said David Cameron wasn't going to beat David Davis, and then he did. And I said he wouldn't become Prime Minister straight away, and he did. So, although we didn't actually win an outright majority in 2010. So, so I started advising the campaign, really. And I was sort of dealing stuff for campaign. And I was quite involved with the youth movement, the Conservative Future. I was chair initially in Harlow, and then I was president in Harlow. And so I was bringing people to help and stuff. And then I went to conference. We were running around, and it felt quite important because I'm still quite young then, but it felt like we were on the West Wing. You know, it was like, and I really loved like a proper campaign. You know, and then when he sort of won when he became leader of the party, it was like, bloody hell, okay, like yeah. I mean, there's now going to be 2 prime ministers. There's going to be Gordon Brown, or there's going to be him. And then Nick Clegg popped up and do you remember when Nick Clegg was like everyone's favourite politician for about 20 minutes?
Yes, yeah.
And he'd done this first debate, and everyone was like, oh my God, the Liberals are going to sweep to power. and even I thought that at one point. I thought, God, you know, like, I think they might, do really, really well here. As it turned out, they didn't really. But then they were in government because there was a coalition. And actually, I really loved that government. I quite like coalitions. I know this is a terrible thing to say politically, but I quite like coalitions because, particularly something like the Tory Lib Dem coalition, what was great about it was when you're in a coalition and you've only got a certain amount of majority, it keeps the liberal left-wing nutters quiet and shut up, and it keeps the hard-right Tory nutters quiet and shuts them up, right? Because you need this kind of
middle ground,
moderation in the middle to get things through. And actually, in lots of ways, it's quite useful to let the right-wing Tories go off and spout stuff and the left-wing Liberal to go and spout stuff because it plays to their bases individually. But actually, there's a lot of good government that's in moderation, in somewhere in the middle ground. And elections, Blair knew this, Cameron knew this, Boris Johnson knew this as well. That elections are won and lost in the centre ground of politics, right? Because most people aren't extreme. And for those that are, they're going to do their stuff anyway, right? So you're going to have people voting for Galloway or whatever else on the left, and you're going to have people voting for Farage and Tice on the right, you know? So they've got their natural homes anyway. There's always going to be UKIP, Reform, Brexit Party on the right. There's always going to be an SWP, Socialist Alliance, Respect Party on the left, you know?
So how has your time in theatre supported your time in politics? Is it essentially the same thing?
Yeah, I think it is. But it's quite performative, isn't it? And so I think you've got to keep it in check and in confine because you don't want to annoy anyone either in the theatre or in politics because actors and politicians all have really long memories, right? There's something I'd said I won't name this politician, but something I said to this politician over 20 years ago. And I don't, it's not like I see them particularly regularly, but I do see them ad hoc at dinners and things. And every time they remind me of what I said. Which I was right and I stand by, but I perhaps shouldn't have said it. So I guess from that point of view, it is a bit of a performance. And also, I think what is really crucial, and this was particularly true when I then went to Boris's campaign for mayor, not for prime minister. I did work on his first mayoral campaign. Again, continuing my unbroken streak of because I thought he'd be the Tory that would lose the least. Because there's no way he could win London. Because London is a Labour city. And you don't go from absolute left-wing bastion that's just been voted in twice for Ken Livingstone to then a right-wing, well, sort of centre-right, he was in them days. Because Boris is actually quite liberal. But Etonian, blah, 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 right, whatever else. But I thought it'd be a hugely fun 3 months to work on the campaign. And there was people like Jonathan Isby from Telegraph who was encouraged to run. I encouraged him to run. There was a few others that encouraged him to run. And then I'd gone off I was in Norfolk at that point. Because in between times, I then went and worked on Hillary's presidential campaign. When I left Harlow Council in 2008, I went straight to work for Hillary's campaign in America, which was an incredible year. And so when I come back, I'd gone then to do my law degree, which I'd put off year after year because I was doing council stuff because I was never meant to get elected. Because I was actually elected in the May. I was meant to go to university that September, but then I got elected, so I couldn't go. So I put it on hold for 4 years, and then Hillary's campaign another year. So I arrived sort of Christmas time 2008 2009 at university 3 months late to start my law degree, and it was just the craziest amount of time. But particularly what was true in Boris's campaign, and to bring you back to the question you asked. Sorry, I'm being rambling now.
No, that's okay. I'm following you.
But I think what happened there was people had contacted me and said, have you seen, I can't remember what poll it was, but there's a poll. And I was like, no, I've looked, no, it's not been released yet, but I'm hearing Boris and Ken are neck and neck. And I said, well, someone's got that wrong, right? That's anyway, he rang me back and he said, no, he said, we are wrong. I said, I thought so. He said, yeah, Boris is leading Ken by a point. And I said, there's absolutely no way that's true. And then this sort of person said to me, I feel like we need to go and work on the campaign. I said, well, if it's true and they are neck and neck, and it's been done by well-meaning amateurs at this point, what's the point? Like, they're obviously doing fair enough. I think we all encouraged him to do it because we didn't think he'd win. But now we had one policy, which was let's get rid of bendy buses. That's all Boris had when he stood for Mayor of London.
He's got a thing about buses, hasn't he?
He loves buses. But let's get rid of bendy buses. That was the only policy we effectively had to run into a mayoral campaign. But then people said, I think we should go and get him over the line. So I went to the head of the law school and I said, look, this is the situation. And he was absolutely furious that I was going to go and do it. I think if I was going to do it for Ken Livingstone, he'd give me an extended 6 months off and probably a holiday to Barbados. But the fact I was going to go work for Boris. But he gave me 3 months off. And so I came back to London, left Norfolk and came back to London and joined the campaign. And unbelievably, he won. And I still couldn't believe it. And actually, it's not a popular opinion. In fact, saying anything nice about Boris isn't very popular these days, and particularly his time in number 10, I am with the majority view on that, and I think it was, which is also why I wouldn't work on his campaign for Prime Minister, the fact I was asked, because I didn't.
So you do choose a political allegiance when you are being an advisor?
Yeah. But I do now, on the basis that I've got some credibility and I can choose now.
Yes.
Whereas there was certain campaigns that I'd worked on previously where, if you want the money, then you've just got to
it sounds very similar to my acting career.
It's so true.
There's this part at the beginning where you've got to take any role that you can get and be on, like you've got to be on any team you can be on to get started. But then you get to a point in your life where it's like now I'm going to choose what's right for me. Yeah,
it's true. And actually you sort of so the biggest one for that was Hillary's first campaign, although I didn't work. I mean, eventually, we lost to Obama, right? So that's okay. But I mean, the second campaign, they lost to Trump. Well, that's that is what it is. But that was something that I was really committed in. And actually, I mean, politics in the US and politics here, despite take all the policy out of it, just the way it works is fascinating. And obviously I'm quite...
Well, it is more a theatre. I feel like we're mirroring more how they do it in the US. Slowly, drips and drabs are coming over here of how they do it over there. For instance, what started in the last sort of 10 years are these debates that we have now, where they stand up behind a podium and they debate against each other.
Yeah.
That is something that's only in the last 10 years, but they've been doing that for a long time in the US.
Yeah, I mean, there was always a presidential debate. I'd quite like an actual debate. I don't think in America or in Britain we actually have a proper debate. I think what we have is a series of sound bites with people stood behind podiums. But I'd quite like there to be an actual debate between two people. But But
they shy away from it, don't they?
Yeah, I think it's good for democracy. But because I think there's also an element of actually, that's always the same setup, isn't it? Right? There's 2 lecterns or 3 lecterns, and then there's a roving moderator who's normally a news presenter or whatever else. There's questions from the audience. Can I ask candidate A? Can I ask candidate B? And they give a question back. Whereas what I'd quite like is they say to me, well, how are you going to pay for that then? Or what have you thought about this? Or what have you thought about... And give them a chance to debate each other, Now, having said that, I'd like that as a member of the public. If I was advising a presidential campaign or a prime ministerial campaign, I'd say absolutely not. We're not signing up to that. Do you know what I mean? Actually, these days I probably would say we should do it because I think it would be ballsy and gutsy. And actually, I feel like whoever campaign I'd work on now, I genuinely believe they would be the best for the job. What I think is quite difficult is if you look at where I do think American politics and British politics are similar now, is the next president of the United States is going to be Joe Biden or Donald Trump. The next prime minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is going to be Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer. For 2 of the biggest jobs in the world, American president, arguably the biggest job in the world, that's not an awful lot of talent. I mean, it is a lesser
of two evils
choice, isn't it? And I think...
And why is that increasingly happening?
I think whether you support Nigel Farage or you don't support Nigel Farage, whatever you think about his views, he is very effusive. He has got a real personality. Boris had a real personality. Trump, whether you support him or not, has got a real personality. And people know them. And the hardest thing in politics is name recognition. And so the truth of it really is to get far, but they are the exceptions to the rule. Because to get far, you need to be quite bland. You need to not kind of be too out there on one wing or the other. I mean, the Tory party...
What, right now? Would you say that's the case right now?
I mean,
in this country?
Yeah.
But not in the States.
Listen, if you look at this week with Rishi Sunak and the Rwanda vote, half his party are furious that they think this is not a liberal, nice way for a liberal democracy to function by sending people to Rwanda, who will only get back unless they commit a crime. So you'll encourage them to make a crime. And half of them are trying to hold them hostage, saying, this doesn't go anywhere near far enough. And that's one party. Whereas effectively, when you've got the ERG, the sort of Brexit kind of groups, you've got the moderate groups, and then you've got the fiscal conservatives, whatever. There's probably 3 or 4 parties within the Conservative Party. And the same's true with Labour. I mean, you've got Starmer, who's kind of quite moderate, quite centrist. But it was just led by the most left-wing politician we've ever seen in political high office as leader of a party since Michael Foot in the 70s. Do you see what I mean? So it's, I think you've got to be a bit bland. And I think where it is different is Blair had personality, and he particularly had personality against John Major. Cameron had personality, he particularly had it against Gordon Brown, who was seen as quite dour and whatever. Even if people thought he was good with the finances or a good chancellor, whatever else, he never really very comfortable as being prime minister. And so I think in those situations, with someone like Blair and Cameron, I think there really was an enthusiasm and a vote that people wanted to go and vote for them. Whereas I feel with something like Rishi and Starmer, I feel Labour will definitely win the next general election. I don't think it'll be as big as people think it's going to be. I certainly don't think it'll be bigger than Blair's majority in 97, although the polls say it will be. I don't believe that.
We've seen them wrong a few times.
Well, absolutely, yeah. But I think the difference is people actively, particularly in 97, it did change later on after Iraq and other things that had happened. But in 97, people wanted to go and vote Labour because Blair was leader. I think it's different now because I think although I don't have any hesitation saying Labour will be the next government, it's not because anyone loves Keir Starmer. It's not because he's got this remarkable charisma or personality or leadership, because we don't have any policies. And all he's doing at the moment is do no evil, which will be enough. But I think it's going to be an anti-Tory vote rather than a pro-Labour vote.
Time for change.
Exactly.
That's all they've got to go on.
Yeah.
That's all they've got to do is say
and
we're
it's
renew.
Isn't it?
That's all they've got to say is this is a new.
Yeah. Last time they were in for 18. The Tories were in for 18 years. Then Blair was in for 30. Well, the Labour were in for 13 years. The Tories have now been in for 14 years this year. So it is cyclical, isn't it?
Yes,
so. And then what will happen is.
So what about you? When is the campaign for JP starting?
Well, I feel like I've probably hung my boots up at this moment in time.
Right.
There isn't anyone on any side of the debate. I'm not wedded. I mean, obviously, I was a Conservative councillor at one point, and I worked for a Conservative mayor, and I've worked for a Conservative Prime Minister. And I still advise if I'm asked to contribute to something that I think I've got something to say and they need a different point of view, I still do that. I'm always happy to share my opinions for free, generally, unless they want them daily, in which case they are going to pay for it. But it would need to be... So I tell you what, so the difference to this would be if in America... fundamentally, I think Donald Trump would be an absolute nightmare to have back in the White House, and I would be really concerned. I am slightly strange because I'm probably centre-right in this country, whereas I'm very much a Democrat in America, which is sort of seen as the left.
Yeah,
if you like.
It's strange, isn't it?
So, but I don't think Biden is cut out for this now, and I think he's a bit of a liability. I think he's too old, and that's a really terrible thing to say. But
why can't they see that within the party? Are they so stuck with it, having been in that kind of situation, been in the party? Does everyone get so wrapped up within their small little world that they're like blinkered to what's going on outside?
I think the difficulty is, I think a lot of people recognise the problem, but don't automatically see the solution. Whereas the truth is, if Biden wasn't going to be the Democratic nominee for president, there'd be three other names that would put into that. So there'd be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's this firebrand New York congresswoman, very, very left. Think Jeremy Corbyn in a skirt, that the country won't like. There'd be Kamala Harris, who's obviously currently vice president, but is seen as the country as being a bit manipulative, behind the scenes, working Joe Biden.
She probably is the real president, let's be honest.
And actually, that is what a lot of America thinks. And so probably wouldn't do that well. And Michelle Obama, who I think would have the opportunity of sweeping 38, 40 states out of the 50, and I would think would go and make a very good president. But in order to do that, she would have to stab in the back her husband's vice president, and now her the president, right? So if it's not Biden, then who is it? And I think that's where they're stuck on. But so for me, to bring this back to the answer to the question is, I don't think there's ever been a more fertile landscape for a third-party candidate. And so if someone were to, if Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson were to now say, oh, I've played running for president and TV, whatever else, and unbelievably, they do poll this stuff, right? And Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is actually really
I know. He's hugely popular, yeah.
But even popular in a political arena.
Yeah, I know.
So... I'm using him as an example because I think it's very unlikely. But if a genuinely credible third-party candidate got involved, that campaign would be such an insurgency that, first of all, it would be fascinating to be part of it, particularly as I'd been part of a Democratic presidential party, the conventions and the campaign. But it would be fascinating to see because you would be, I mean, it would be such an insurgency because you'd just have rocks thrown at you from both sides the whole time. And I don't know if it's just the masochist in me that just quite fancies getting beaten down on the airways for 9 months to do that. But I think it would be genuinely fascinating. But it would have to, for me to go back into politics now, there would have to be a cause, or a person that I 100% believed in. I couldn't now go back and take money from any current of our politicians because I don't believe in it, and I've always had to believe where I genuinely thought David Cameron was going to do stuff for this country, and actually I think he did in lots of ways. Who would have thought it would ever be a Conservative Prime Minister that would legalise gay marriage when not that long ago in our lifetime when we were at school, when Labour brought in civil partnerships, which is a kind of step towards gay marriage, the Tories voted against it as a party. And
then 20 years later.
20 years later, so I find it fascinating. But
what's your feet on that wire?
Oh, sorry. That's it, yeah. And that was what he said as he went up in smoke. So it would need to be a crucial issue or a crucial person that would bring me back into politics.
So is that why you've got time at the moment to get back into performing? While you're now, I see a lot on social media that you're singing quite a lot. Cabaret act.
Yeah, that kind of all happened a bit by accident. So a couple of years ago, I was asked if I, as an honour really, if I would do the Royal British Legion, be the act singing for the Royal British Legion annual dinner thing. To which, of course, I said yes. But then I said, oh, God, I haven't sung on stage for probably a decade. Probably it was as long as that. So I thought, well, I'll need to start practicing and whatever else. So I went and did it. And the truth is, I wasn't very happy with it. I felt like I think what I'd done actually is I think I'd over-rehearsed. And then I felt like I hadn't saved my best for the night. I felt like a couple of days before I'd done a performance that was just unbelievable. Everyone should have seen it, but it was just me in the kitchen. Right? So I felt like I'd not left it all out on the field. But it went down very, very well. And then from that, there was some other advances to people say, well, would you come and do this? And I said, well, I don't really do it anymore. And then after about the 8th or 9th time, my partner then said to me, well, listen, I know you don't do this anymore, but actually the money's quite useful. So
so get back on it.
Yeah, so maybe... and I was like, oh, but I haven't got the equipment now, and I haven't got this, and whatever. Well, we can sort that. So, yeah, and then there was someone who is kind of new, because I've moved and whatever else, and I've got this new group of friends that I see, whatever else, and people like, my friends Nick and Dave were saying, well, it's quite good, you should carry on with this, and they all take the mickey out of me by being terrible. They come to every gig I do and say you're terrible. And then another girl called Chelsea, who's an act herself, but also is quite good at booking other acts and whatever. So it has sort of grown, and actually I'd sort of forgotten how much I like performing. So it sort of has reignited the bug a little bit. So I think if I hadn't gone back and started singing, I definitely wouldn't have thought, well, I can do the panto. Right, and I'd never written the panto before. So I've written this panto, and I am really proud of this panto script. I think it's actually genuinely really funny. So I am gonna go back and I'm gonna do the Dame one last time.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna do.
You love it. So it's one of them roles that there's so much love that you receive.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, and this when from when I did Rocky Horror or when I did Grease or I did any of the stuff that I've done on tour or I've done in London, whatever. I think the truth of it is, I always had real imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. That I never genuinely felt I was good enough to be doing it.
Why?
Because I hadn't trained. I felt like I'd sort of blagged my way into particular companies, and then they liked me. And this really happened when I was playing the teenager part in Grease. which is fabulous because again it's one song and and you're done. You're on the whiskey by 9. Which I loved. I was off for I was off because I went to a wedding of a really close friend. So I was off for that week, and then I was ill. And whilst I was off, someone obviously stepped into my role, and someone who I didn't actually know that well, but knew that I was in Greece, messaged me whilst I wasn't there to say, wow, JP, I have to say, I've seen you in a couple of things now, but last night you were absolutely awesome. And it's when I wasn't there. So, right? So the fact that they'd said, well, I've seen you in a couple of things and I thought you were good, but last night you were incredible. Right? And I thought, wow, I mean, it's the kind of Martin McCutcheon thing now, like my understudy's better than I am sort of thing. So I did something that was really bad, actually. I can't remember if I tell you this story.
Yeah, no, we need to hear it now.
So I kept saying I was ill. Or I was ill. I was genuinely ill. But then I felt a bit better, but I didn't have the full voice back. So I booked a ticket to the show. And I went in the most terrible bloody disguise you've ever seen.
What, fake moustache, glasses?
Yeah, do you know what? Not that far away, literally. I mean, people obviously thought he was a bit mental. And so I genuinely went to watch this guy do my part. Not that I'm, bitter. And he was fantastic. He brought the house down. And that really, and he was better than I was. Now, that had 2 effects. One, it made me... we're on tour, so it'd been quite a long time, and I was quite jaded, and I was quite knackered. So I was holding back, I think. And actually, I think there is an element of... And I've done it as an understudy. You may have done it as an understudy. The performance I give as an understudy is way better than any performance I'll ever give as an actual named role. Because you do that every... Whereas honestly, you get
every
night's your last night, isn't it? Yeah. Right? You never may get this opportunity again. So I did it. But so it had 2 effects. One, it made me better because I really looked at it again and looked at it fresh and wanted to try something differently. And actually then spoke to the MD and we had a little bit of a change of arrangement because I thought that was... and that was good because then they felt like I'm still continuing to improve. But secondly, it then really, really red flagged in my head the imposter syndrome, that you're not good enough to be here. And also, I'm quite straight down the middle where it should be the best person for the best job. And quite clearly, if there was someone just in the company that was better than I was, just in that cast that was better than I was, then there were 300 people that were actually better than me in that part. And so there was an element of, it's nice they think I'm good enough to do the role and not embarrass myself or embarrass the show. And they clearly want my company and they want me around, but the show could be better without me. And that sort of went, that was a bit of a spiral for me then. And so then...
Well, there's the ego is taking a dent there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing is as well, it wasn't like I'd never felt that way. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like, well, wow, someone's come on and done my part for one night. Thank Christ they're going back to another show tomorrow or whatever else because they're awesome. Because there'll always be, if Alfie Boe was doing my part, right? If Michael Crawford was doing my part, if Michael Ball was doing my part, of course they'll come in and be better. But, I may not be the best, but I'm the best in my price range. That's what I say, right? So you can pay their fees if you want, right? So, it's not going, oh, I have to be the best. It's definitely not true. But I think then... that was a big thing than me then going on to do Rocky Horror. It's the last thing that I did, but can you believe it was now nearly 20, getting on for 20 years ago. But what I loved about that was it was new every night. It was never the same show twice. Like Joseph is the same show every night. Grease is the same show every night. Rocky Horror is never the same show because they shout out and they interact and they do, and I loved it. And I think if I was ever going to make a return for anything, I think I've got one last. I'd like to go back and do one last night in something, like in a big theatre. You know, so one last night doing something I'd quite like to do, and I probably would choose Rocky. I could do anything, but the fact of me going back and doing the Dane this year is just something I want to do again. But also, there is just an element of I don't think I ever at the time enjoyed myself while I was doing it, and I think now I'm old enough to be in a situation where I think I really, you know, if I did it for one more run or one more night or one more anything else, I think I would take the time to enjoy it and go, yeah, you know, I should have been here.
It takes a while to learn that, doesn't it? That you need to live in the moment and enjoy the moment for what it is.
Yeah.
When we're younger, I think we're too busy looking ahead and looking back and being either in. For me, definitely, I was definitely always in the future or always in the past. I was never in the moment. Whereas as you get older, you do discover. I've discovered. It sounds like you are too. Discovering this moment to enjoy.
Yeah, I think so, and I think what's really difficult is I heard this great statistic a couple of years ago, so it may be out of date, but I suspect it isn't. But there are the same amount of performing graduates that are that graduate every year from university. That there are jobs in the industry in this country as a whole. So it's the same number. So I don't know what it is. Say there's 100,000 jobs in the performing arts in this country. Every year, 100,000 new graduates come through. And that's really tough, right? And actually, I mean, in the days when I was first starting, my parents were really against it because they wanted to get a proper job. Which I did go and get a law degree at the end, so I hope I ticked that off. But it was still quite seen as quite, you know, it was a difficult and desperate and tough career. It gave rise to the old, you know, what's an actor's favourite piece of dialogue or most recent used piece of dialogue? Do you want fries with that? and that was true because that is, and I've done it myself. You know, I've taken like call centre jobs and whatever else in between parts and whatever else, and it is to get to the next thing. But and you can understand why. And I think this is also why I may thinking about the performing side is because by the time people get to my age, normally they've given up by now because they've had kids and they've got mortgage
and responsibilities
and they don't want to be chasing the next thing. And also touring is really, really arduous. You know, living out of a suitcase is really arduous.
But is it worth it?
It's worth it for the experience. I don't think I'd like to do it again. Well, it depends how long it's for. Depends how long it's for.
Sounds like you're talking yourself into it already.
Yeah, well, do you know what I'm thinking is that someone said to me quite recently, we had quite a similar discussion about why I left theatre and whatever else. And I said, would I ever go back? I said, well, it all sort of depends. But then they sort of saying to me, well, you know, there's a lot more playing parts now. And actually, you know, there's a lot of graduates every year, but there aren't many 40, 50, 60-year-olds.
No.
Like, whoa, hang on, I'm just 40.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, actually. I went to meet a new agent a couple of years ago, and we were sitting down having a coffee, and he said, right now, your age, there's not many of you out there. There's a lot of 21-year-olds.
Yeah.
There's a lot, you know, there's a lot of 21-year-olds. Like you said, there's 100,000 new 21-year-olds every year.
Absolutely.
But by the time they get into their late 30s, early 40s, most of them, their responsibilities are so heavy that they can't find a way in to have this moment in their life anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the opportunities do start to become, there isn't actually another 100,000 of you out there.
Yeah.
So maybe the opportunities are greater for you.
And, you know, I think there's also, like, the parts that you never get. You say, well, yeah, but the parts be rubbish. And then there's like, well, Captain Von Trapp. Michael Ball's just gone back in as the older character in Aspects of Love. And Captain... Is it Pinkerton?
Oh, that's the beautiful thing with performing. There is no age to it.
Yeah.
There is no moment where you have to say, I'm stopping this.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I would like to do, which is, you'll probably laugh given our earlier conversation, is I'd like to tackle one last Shakespeare. Right, because now I've got an appreciation for Shakespeare that I didn't have when we were doing Romeo and Juliet.
Yes. Yeah.
I think in lots of ways that kind of lit the fuse because there was one night. Do you remember? You might remember this actually. This is reminiscing again.
Go on.
Do you remember I got told off?
No, I don't ever remember you getting...
Yeah, I know.
You were never that kind of kid that got told off. What are you talking about? No, I remember you getting told off multiple times.
Yeah, but this was for my performance. That's why I think it stung me and went with me. But I remember... So it was the death
You're
scene.
determined to pull that all down, aren't you?
Well, I have to say, it'd only be you who would put it in front of the chair.
Do you know what? Do you know what? I'm learning lessons. I think next time I'm going to tape that wire down.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
See, I'm always here to help.
You are.
That's Harlow Council still offering good advice. So I done. So when we're doing Romeo and Juliet, and you've just died, and Juliet's died, and it's all very sad. And then Friar Lawrence comes on and does this speech when you're dead. There was one particular night, and I came on and did this speech, and right, and you know how critical I am. I nailed this speech. I mean, I just nailed it, right? And you know, what's sad about it is, I'll come back to that in a second. But I nailed this speech. It's the best I'd ever done, the best I would ever do it. Right? It was fantastic, and I was starting to pause and be in that moment, and the control. I never remember experiencing ever in any performance I've ever given where the audience were hanging on every word, and you could feel a pin drop. There was no rustling, there was no movement. People were there, and then I felt a bit of a lump in my throat, and whatever I'd done to feel that, suddenly people started crying in the audience, and it was audible, and the fact they'd started crying made this lump in my throat get a bit high, to the point that I almost started crying. And then I carried on with the speech, and whilst I'm doing the speech, a tear ran down my cheek, which then made more people cry, which made me more. And I walked off stage, and I whoever was in the wings, and they were like, "That was awesome!" Like, JP, that was. I was like, "Yeah, I know."
Give me my Oscar.
Give me my Oscar. And I went back to the dressing room, and then I came out. No, I went back to the dressing room, and I perhaps had a whiskey, because the rumours were there was whiskey in my dressing room. So I had a whiskey, and the cans was the speakers were still on, and you were on stage talking to Lawrence with someone else, and.
So this is after the show now.
This is after the show. But the speakers were still on, so I could hear every word that was being said. And then and it was, what? Well, I remember opening the dressing room door and shouting, "The speakers are on, I can hear you." And Lawrence going, "Well, you should be hearing it." And I went out, and I was so furious. Right, it's the closest I've ever come to punching Lawrence. I was absolutely, because by any stretch of the imagination, it was fantastic, that performance. And he said, "Never ever do something on stage that you didn't do in the rehearsal room." And I understand that now. I didn't understand that then. But it wasn't like, oh, I want to try something. It was just, I was so caught in the emotion of the moment. It was a real emotive experience. And so to go from that high to then be crushed, like I was expecting plaudits, do you know what I mean? Not criticism, as it were.
So what did you learn from that?
Oh, well, I never worked with Lawrence again. No, that's not true. That's not true. What I learned from it was, I take the principle of actually you shouldn't do something on stage that you've not rehearsed, but to look deeper, to look more meaningful. And also, you've got to remember, this was youth theatre. It wasn't that we'd all just done, 12 years at Sylvia Young or East 15 or whatever. Like, we were comprehensive school kids from Harlow in the main, with no acting experience. And to have found that moment was beautiful, was just beautiful. And so I think on the one hand, it did teach me a lesson about, there's a good line between encouragement and nurturing talent, but there being basis for rules. Don't do stuff on stage that you wouldn't do in rehearsal. But also recognising when someone has made a connection to a piece or to an audience or to whatever else, encourage them to try and seek that more often. And the one I come back to was there was a point when Laurence Olivier was in Antony and Cleopatra with Helen Mirren. I think Helen Mirren was playing Cleopatra, and he'd gone on and he'd be doing the show night after night after night, and there's this one that he was just absolutely incredible. Like, he was astounding. The cast noticed it, the audience knew it, but he'd done it every night. But this was whatever else. And backstage, he was vile, and people were like, "Oh, get out of my way, get out of my way!" And he'd go back to the dressing room, come back, and then he went on, finished, ended the show, brought the whole. Everyone know that it had been one of the most fantastic pieces. No, it wasn't Annie. It was Othello. It was Othello, and Helen Mirren was Desdemona. And it was unbelievable. Everyone had said like the best it had ever been done, whatever else. And he flew off stage, went back to the dressing room, slammed the door, whatever else. And some of the cast sort of tentatively went up and knocked on the door and were like, "Are you okay?" And he was like, "We just want to say you're wonderful tonight." And he was like, "I know, and I'll never be it again, will I?" And it was that kind of, he knew that there were just moments when, I mean, Sir Laurence Olivier, Lord Olivier, like, where the theatres are named after this man. He amazing, like probably the best actor relatively we've ever produced in this country. But he knew there was this zenith or this peak he'd reached one night, and just the gods of theatre went with you one night, and it was the best it will ever be, and he'll never ever achieve that again. Not that I'm comparing myself to Lord Olivier here in the speech that I gave, but that was mine. That was mine. That was your Nessun Dorma, if you like.
So I know you've got a gig to get to soon.
You have. I'm really sorry.
No. So as we wrap this up, if you could go back and visit that younger self, that Friar Lawrence on that night, what advice would you give to him, knowing all the things that you know now?
I would say you're not as good as you think you are, but you could be better than you think you could possibly be. But you need to, if you want to pursue this, you have to be all in. You can't just hope for the McNuggets of it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't, don't pick up a piece of Shakespeare and now think that you're a scholar. And you need to, there's a lot of hard graft that goes with it. And if you want to be an all-round performer, an all-round actor, an all-round entertainer, whatever it is you want to do, having talent isn't enough if you don't work at it. It's quite critical, isn't it?
It's nice.
Yeah.
It's lovely. Well, thank you.
Well, it's so profound.
It is, yeah. What a profound moment to wrap this up on. I truly appreciate you being here today, JP.
Thank you very much.
It's been really nice reminiscing.
It's been really strange. It's been, yeah. Cause I think I said to you before I came in, I was quite nervous about it. I'm not actually that comfortable talking about myself, to be honest, which might surprise a lot of people because they think I'm a gobby git. But it was. I tell you what was quite interesting. I'd quite like to hear more of your evidence. I think I'd come back and interview you.
Yes.
Have you done one of these yet?
No.
Oh, right. Well,
no, this isn't about me. This is about, little moments maybe, but this is about you.
But you've got some good stories to tell.
That was the BTS Creative Academy Podcast, Uncut. I appreciate you joining us for this conversation. If you'd like to find out more about the BTS Creative Academy, just search BTS Creative Academy. And so that you don't miss out on any future conversations, don't forget to like and subscribe.